This is Charles Yee of the Senate Banking Committee staff.
Point of order.
Former tank commander in Bosnia, by the way.
Is he going to explain it?
He's going to explain it.
I'll hold it. I'm not Lazarus. So.
Let Senator Corker hold the mic for him.
What do you say? Corker.
Forgive yourself if you don't get the joke there. I don't get it either. That's because that's the kind of joke that you find laugh out loud hilarious only if you were still awake and at work at 5:29 in the morning. Check out the timestamp on that. These senators, look up in the upper right-hand corner, 5:29 a.m. Eastern Time. These senators and members of Congress were working on financial reform at 5:29 a.m., not because they got an early start on the day, but because that's how late they had stayed up. Their session started yesterday at 10 a.m., it went past dawn this morning. But it worked, kind of. After those all-day, all-night negotiations, the conference committee, the committee designed to hammer out a deal to bridge the differences between the House and the Senate on Wall Street reform, did hammer something out, and it passed. It passed with 0 Republican votes, naturally. The measure still needs final passage, of course, before it gets to the president. But the president today made clear that he knows it's on its way.
We are poised to pass the toughest financial reforms since the ones we created in the aftermath of the Great Depression. Early this morning, the House and Senate reached an agreement on a set of Wall Street reforms that represents 90% of what I proposed when I took up this fight.
The House is expected to vote on the Wall Street reform package on Tuesday. The Senate is expected to vote later next week. And President Obama is expected to sign it into law before the 4th of July. Joining us now on remarkably little sleep is the chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Congressman Barney Frank of Massachusetts. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us and congratulations.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. It's, it's obviously not everything we wanted. It is considerably more than I was hoping even for, and I think it's going to be a very useful package.
The president said today that he got 90% of what he wanted out of this legislation. You said you got more than you expected to get. Are there regrets that you still have outstanding about things that you still think really need to be done that didn't make it into the legislation?
Well, in fairness to Senator Chris Dodd, who's been very unfairly criticized, he's got to get 60 votes in the Senate. It's a harder job for him. I need a majority. You correctly noted that this became very partisan on the part of the Republicans, who incredibly are maintaining that we don't need any financial reform, that things should be left as they are. He's got to get 3 or 4 Republicans, and he's had to compromise some. There's an amendment that I did not like to the Consumer Bureau. We are setting up an independent consumer bureau, and that's a great tribute to the work of Elizabeth Warren and others. But there was a procedural set of roadblocks they're going to have to go through. I wish we didn't have that, but we do. Working with Maxine Waters and Mel Watt, members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we were trying to get $2 billion to help people who are now $3 billion for people who are now unemployed and can't pay their mortgages, not because they made poor judgments, but because they happen to be living in a time of high unemployment. We got cut back to $1 billion. I'm going to try and get another $1 billion of that. On the other hand, we did get an independent consumer bureau. We got the Volcker rule, which months ago people thought we wouldn't get. We got it with some slight changes. Blanche Lincoln's position on derivatives and banks won, which it should have. I had a question about some other parts of that, and that was resolved. On the very important point, we have laws in there now that will make it simply illegal to give poor people the kind of loans that led them into financial ruin and ruined neighborhoods. And finally, I would just mention this. You will no longer be able to do what we call 100% securitization. If you lend money to other people, you're not going to be able to sell the whole loan. You're going to be required to keep enough of that yourself so that you'll have some interest in repayment.
On that issue of the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, as you mentioned, we have one, and it's fairly independent, and that's an achievement. I understand that it will be within the Fed, even while it is still mostly independent. Do you expect to see somebody like Elizabeth Warren heading up that agency? Do you expect it to be a high-profile agency?
I hope it will be. Let me be clear. I gave in on the Fed only once it became clear that, frankly, it helps us because instead of having to get an appropriation for it, we can take the money that the Federal Reserve now raises from its own financial activities and uses to not do anything for consumers, but theoretically has a consumer agency. I'm going to shift that money over to the consumer agency. So that's a good argument for having in the Fed. But I want to make it very clear. The consumer agency will receive its mail at the Federal Reserve, but no one in the Federal Reserve system will be allowed to open it. It will be an independent agency. So I look forward to that. Yes, I hope it will be Elizabeth Warren. Look, we run into this problem with this crazy confirmation process in the Senate. But I would very much like Elizabeth Warren to be there. She's been the founder of this idea. She's been a great ally. She's a woman of great passion and great practicality. And I'll tell you, one of my proudest moments as a member of Congress was the day that the committee I chair passed the bill to set up an independent consumer agency after we'd been told that it could never happen. And she said on that day, you know, they told me not even to try because the banks always win, but they didn't win today.
On the issue of who is covered by that agency, some of the things that have received attention are car dealers. Car dealers ended up getting exempt from oversight by that agency. Payday lenders, however, one of the most, in my view, egregious abusers of people with few options in the financial system, will be included in oversight of that agency. You felt like there were trade-offs there?
Well, that was one of my major victories in the conference, which is to cover payday lenders, check cashers. And by the way, I argued to the small banks, you know, the small banks have not generally been the abusers here. And I said to them, you know, more of the problems come outside of the banks. More of the problems come from the unregulated payday lenders and check cashers, and finally we were able to win that. On the auto dealers, I just plain lost. I voted to include them, and I'll tell you what the problem was, Rachel. People, first of all, they're people who, their culture is to be outgoing and friendly. They're nice people, and most of them do nice things. That doesn't mean, by the way, that you don't regulate people. We regulate to deal with the abusers, even though they're a minority in almost every area. But the added thing that got the auto dealers their exemption is that last year, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were treating auto dealers very unfairly. They were terminating dealerships arbitrarily. People who had put money in the dealership suddenly found themselves with no cars to sell. That generated so much sympathy for the auto dealers that got them over the top over my objection.
Chairman Barney Frank, Democratic Congressman of Massachusetts, thank you for being here. I hope you get some rest, and I hope you have some appreciation of your colleagues electing to name this bill after you, the Dodd-Frank Act. It will be when it's signed, and that you can recognize the historic nature here, even though you're tired. Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.